I've got you. We're good. So welcome to my COVID project. It's Capoeira in Canada podcast,
What
and
number? What episode around here?
we haven't really numbered episodes yet. I'm just gathering content at this time. Um, but you are the third person for me to interview so far. We've met, which is pretty cool, and I've got a number of other invitations out that have been accepted, and they're we're just a matter of scheduling those interviews as well. So, which is really cool. I'm kind of excited.
All right.
So yeah, it's good. So let's get into things. So the whole idea of this podcast was or is to talk to in a quasi bachipapo kind of format to those capoeiristas in Canada who either moved here from Brazil and started teaching and have an established academy, or to Canadians who are capoeiristas and have gone on to establish an academy at one point in time in their I don't want to call it a career of capoeira, but their time as a capoeirista is probably better.
Right.
Having chosen to make a capoeira as part of their lifestyle. So let's start. I'm gonna hand it over to you. Why don't you tell us who is Camarao? When did he get started? And tell us a bit about the history of not just Capoeira Malês, but Capoeira Malês Burlington, and more specifically.
It's funny that every time we seem to get together, not us, but on the grander scale at an event, and we always talk about our personal history or the history where we come from. It always seems in North America to default to this movie, this Only the Strong movie, which unfairly I think got some chuckles for a long time, but I think we have to acknowledge the impact that the movie had on North American capoeira, because none of us knew what it was. We all grew up with established Asian martial arts, which primarily were karate and taekwondo.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the background, there was some traditional jiu-jitsu. BJJ never came along until years and years later.
Yeah.
There was, Kung Fu was there, but really taekwondo and karate dominated the martial arts scene here.
Judo as well, but also from a sporting perspective, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? Even today, if you Google judo in Toronto, you're not going to get a lot of responses.
Right.
I think it's a very underrated martial art, or martial sport, however you want to classify it. So this movie came along. I happened upon a VHS copy of it and watched it like late one Friday or Saturday night, and I was enamored by it, quite honestly, because a lot of it was the antithesis of everything that a North American boy grows up doing or not doing, or we didn't dance, we didn't sing. The acrobatics were for girls. This is my generation. Gymnastics.
I'm not too far behind you, so I understand completely.
I was like the stereotypes, and along came this art that just it had all those things intertwined together. But I mean, at that time, I figured I was just going to have to go to Brazil. I don't even know how I would have figured that out, quite honestly, back then, because I wouldn't have had internet. This was in '93, I believe, so I wouldn't have had internet back then. I think somehow, maybe just in conversation, I talked to somebody and they, I got a little bit more information. But I thought, this is just not doable. And then sometime in 1995, in the fall of 1995, I started making phone calls, probably because I watched the movie a number of times at that point. There really wasn't anything else as far as North American cinema went. There was one movie that I found out in 1996. It's called Rooftops, and it's about this wayward street dancing kid who can't figure himself out, and then he ends up using capoeira as a tool for self betterment. But other than those two, really, I mean, it's not Street Fighter. It's there was another one of those martial tournament movies that started to expose capoeira more. But again, that's I'm getting ahead of myself. So I made a couple of phone calls. I ended up speaking with the Brazilian consulate, and they told me there's this guy, his name is Vicente, and he was teaching at Trinity Bellwoods Community Center. So when in December 1995, I went there, and I walked through the door, and it was like walking into a little bit of Brazil. There was a group, I'm going to say, of at least 20 people, maybe 30, and it was just a mix of younger people. They were probably all about 5 to 10 years younger than me at the time, and doing, loosely doing all these things that I had seen in the movie. And the class was run by Vicente, who was Brazilian from Rio, who moved to Canada, and another guy named Miru, who I've lost track of him over the years. He was a truck driver, and he would teach when he was in town. He was, at that time, he was the senior out of the two. I believe Vicente was a graduado, and Miru was in instructor. He had a three-colored braided cord. But he was kind of in and out of the picture. Vicente was really who was running the class. And that was in December 95, and by that February of 96, we had a Batsato in Toronto, and that was the first Batsato in Toronto. There was a Mesrando Testia, who trains in Vancouver. He was very young in Capoeira at the time. I think he had a blue cord, I want to say, and he was here from Vancouver for work, and he organized Messi Bahan in Toronto and coordinated a Batsato. The month after that, Messi Curisco made his first trip. He was a Contra-Mestre at the time, to Toronto on a layover from Vancouver back to Brazil, and he came and visited one of our classes. And then a Messi named Messi Usado was living in, I think he's in Singapore now. He was living in the UK, and there was a couple of students that got a hold of him and flew him over to do a workshop in around March of 96. So there was quite a bit of, in that spring, our eyes were really, really opened to what Capoeira was outside of our little class of 30 people who, we just didn't have that kind of exposure on that scale. And then from what I understand in the background, there were some conversations between different groups who had traveled through Toronto about getting representation in the city because it was so promising. Largest city in Canada really didn't have. We had an organized Capoeira class. There was only one. There was a couple of people kind of teaching on the side out of community centers, but there was one organized class that was supported by the Brazilian embassy. So there was room, really, really, for it was fertile ground for Capoeira, for the Capoeira inception in Toronto. And then it was a bit of a mishmash, quite honestly, continuing up until about 1999, when Contra-Mestre Tesoura, he attended Messi Lua's event. He was from Brazil, attended Messi Lua's event in Vancouver with plans to come to Toronto and start an academy through the group that we were all part of at that time. So I believe that was July in 1999, and he came. And then in that fall, Messi Bola was part of a group of people that came to Toronto in October to do a workshop. And then that January 2000, he moved here and he established his academy. And that's when things really, really took off. That's when, between probably 2000, 2004, 2005, we got between 5 and 10 incorporated groups, and the scene really, really exploded.
Nice.
It's funny. It's kind of mirrored the development almost identically of Capoeira, not with the same groups, but kind of the same growth curve as Capoeira in Montreal.
Right. Yeah, I think when I was speaking to Contra-Mestre Pirata, the timeline's pretty similar, based on what he was describing to me about what happened or what's happened there in the early 2000s. So I was around in '99. I was training a lot, and just being one of the ones that was around for 4 or 5 years. I just asked to cover the odd class here and there when the teacher couldn't be there. Contra-Mestre Falcon had joined the class 9 months after I did, and he was doing a lot more with the teacher at the time. So I just by default, there was a few classes that I got asked to cover, and I really fell in love with teaching. I taught the martial arts prior to that. So teaching was an aspiration of mine. Like I was nowhere near ready to lead a class. But it was on the radar that was something that I wanted to do down the line, and as I said,
Contra-Mestre Tesoura came here in '99, and then in 2000 for some he was doing some stuff where he had to travel back and forth from Brazil, and he left the class with myself and Contra-Mestre Falcon. That was in late 2001 for almost a year. And then he came back and taught full time for about 2 years, and then in the spring of 2003, there was another turnaround in the group, and we turned to Mestre Lua for guidance, and he decided to oversee our growth from Vancouver.
Yep.
And he left me in charge of running the academy downtown, which at the time we probably had 30 or 40 students. And that was my responsibility until January 2005 when Mestre Lua moved to Toronto from Vancouver. And the same month, I was hired to teach capoeira at a class in Concord at a Krav Maga studio. So I taught there for a year and a half. And then I changed careers. So I took a step back from teaching for about probably about 9 months. And then in March of 2007, we found a space in Burlington to open up a class, and it stayed at that academy for 13 years. And then that property was sold. But I mean, the teaching continues. You know, this COVID has really thrown a wrench in everybody's spokes, obviously.
All of us, for sure.
So who knows? The next step, maybe. You know, I'm still working with the same owner of the academy that we moved to. Maybe finding a new location, and there's a possibility down the road of looking at buying property and opening an academy.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up like the challenges of what COVID's done to all the academies and anything gym or fitness or martial arts related, and it's had a huge impact. Let's talk about, you know, what have been some of your, aside from COVID, you know, and the impact of it, what have been some of your greatest challenges of starting and maintaining an academy?
Student base. Student base is huge, especially when you get into an urban area. There's a different mentality between urban and suburban people that do anything. Like, so I worked with a guy who wanted to get into boxing. Going back further than that, actually, in the 80s, I did martial arts, and 1989, I was part of an academy that closed, and the teacher was quite talented, and I wanted to stay with him. So he found space to rent in Alliston. So I traveled to Alliston. There was a small group of us, like 4 of us, who would drive to Alliston 3 times a week to train, because that's where the talent was. That's who I aligned myself with. Mm-hmm. So I find that in an urban environment that people generally want to go and do what's most convenient, not necessarily what's best. And I use that term best loosely, but they really want a matter of convenience. So I was kind of the guy who wanted to get into boxing. You know, I don't know if everybody listening to the podcast will understand the geography of Toronto, but he lives in Liberty Village, and I suggest, well, I know there's a boxing academy that's in Bloor and Dundas that's been there for a number of years, and you probably get what you want there. No, that's too far. Too far is like, that was about, I don't know, 4 kilometers, maybe at the most. But I find that the urban mentality is you want it kind of at your fingertips, right? Like, people depend on bicycles and on transit, so they want convenience.
It needs to be convenient and a quick walking distance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So, but when you grow up suburban, you realize, you know, your car goes everywhere. Like, I grew up in Mississauga in the 70s and 80s, and the transit system was not wonderful. Like, it was whatever it was, bus every 45 minutes, and plus a decent walk after you got off the bus. It wasn't like, you know, a metropolis where there's a transit stop at every
intersection almost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a challenge coming out to a suburban environment to teach. It was, you know, and on top of that, it's when you teach in a city, in an urban environment, there's literally people that live across the street next door to where you're teaching, right? Because everything is a lot more condensed.
Right.
When you go suburban, right, you've got, you know, you've got your commercial area and your retail area and your residential area, and it's split up. So I find that getting a student base can be a challenge. And I'm not a businessman to begin with. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, for 25 years, but I'm about the art and about teaching. Who comes along, I'm just not a businessman. So, and I don't depend on it. I have a career. So I don't need to pump up the numbers just to pay the rent. Like, you know, I want the quality. So, you know, and in hindsight, I probably could have gone about it in a different way or a better way. Or there's probably little things that I could have done, like make a sandwich board and stick it on the sidewalk, which I talked about but never did. You know, I talked to another student about about using social media and not investing a great deal of money into it, but I didn't because I don't really educate myself in it. But that you can address a certain demographic, a certain geographical area through social media with a small investment, and then you can try to reap the rewards of that. And then there's Groupon, which again, I'm the guy that just kind of wants to show up and teach and work and sweat, and I would likely have to hire somebody to go out and hustle my business for me, or do things a lot smarter than I can do them. Like really, I would say that's it. I mean, finding a space, finding a good working relationship with somebody. You would think, for me, I've taught in a number of different locations, dance studios, excuse me, martial arts clubs, parks, banquet halls. I taught a class at a library once. Like I've taught a lot of places, but I find for me the martial arts club holds the best energy because I grew up doing martial arts.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take that away from capoeira. I want people to walk into the space and realize that they're doing a martial art first and foremost.
Yeah.
Not to say that in another environment. I don't want to take doing that successfully.
For sure, but I think we've talked about this on the side as well, and in other conversations where you find that there's a although some other martial artists who don't really understand the martial aspect of capoeira, but those who do will have a greater respect, and you'll develop a stronger relationship and working relationship, and they can help each other out in ways, right? And for sure, and I can totally relate to that, which is
you feed off that energy that they leave in the air when they're done. If you're following their club. And I've taught martial arts clubs where that energy is non-existent for a number of reasons. Like stupid little things like the climb. The owner of the academy is too stingy to leave the climate control on for you, and like it's just. In January, you don't want to train in a 55 or a 60-degree temperature room. You want the heat. You want the body to move well.
Yeah, it should be. As an example that you're drawing, I mean, the environment should be conducive to our health, right? And when we're doing physical training, for sure.
Yeah, and everybody's got to make a bottom line, and I get that it's business, but I've been lucky that the place that we've ended up most recently. Has been very much about the local business and about support and again, it's analogous to like I have my living, I have my career.
Yep.
I don't need to make profit from capoeira. The profit will come. If it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. The same thing as the gentleman that I'm working with now is that he recognizes. And again, I don't want to take anything away from anybody who's living off of their income and doing it as a business right in the space of their academy.
Well, for people like us, we kind of have to depend on them too if we're looking for a place to teach, and run our classes.
So recognize that I'm walking into a space with 4 or 6 students, and I just can't afford $800, $1,000 a month for rent, and keeping in mind that to build momentum with students, I need a certain amount of consistency. I can't teach 4 days a month and expect anybody to maintain the interest in sticking with what I'm doing, or to develop them as a student, by not having a consistent training schedule.
Yeah, for sure.
So, finding the right person to train with because, I wasn't in a position to buy my own space, either financially or I didn't have the time to do it because of my work schedule. Really, it's not. I guess in hindsight, it's only 2 or 3 things that are potential obstacles. I mean, they can be huge though, right? And they can really drain your energy.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go on to talking about Canadian culture, and from your perspective, do you think at least capoeira here in Canada has evolved? I guess it's kind of a double question here. In your perspective, how has capoeira evolved in Canada from your perspective? Let's start with that.
It's funny that you mentioned Canadian culture, and I've had this conversation for years and years and years with people. What's a Canadian culture? What's an American culture? I don't, and maybe it's a little bit fantastical, but what are our folkloric stories? What's our it seems to me that one of the things that attracted me to Asian martial arts before I was even exposed to capoeira was their culture. They had these tales about, dragons and warriors and people being able to do these fantastic things with their bodies and, like even the foods that they ate. I could see the depth in it from a very, very young age.
Yeah.
And I still don't really see that here. I don't see it's hustling society, but
Unless I would say, I think the only true Canadian culture that would have that would be the Indigenous, right? They would be.
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm not taking away from that at all.
Yeah,
but
sure.
for those of us who have a European background,
yeah,
culturally speaking, what do we have? Like what?
we don't have a we don't have a lampion, we don't have a basuru, right?
What celebrations are our own? Being, immigrants to this country, like white European immigrants. And anyways, that's a whole different discussion. But
for sure.
But that was what martial arts, right? Was the culture of it. And then I've taught people over the years that I had one student that was I remember that was Colombian, and he, one day, we can sing our songs in English and Spanish, and I'm like, no, we can't do that. That's robbing capoeira of its culture. Well, I don't want to do that. I'm not Brazilian, but I try to be protective of capoeira the way that I was taught it, and it's important that we maintain. Well, I think it's important that we maintain the African influences to Brazil, and then subsequently the Brazilian influences to Canada or the United States or Poland or wherever around the world that capoeira is taught. It's not. We don't want to. We're not accommodating, right? We're not. Let's make this easier or work for it. Like, you should be immersing yourself in that culture, in that, if you got a Brazilian teacher that is traveling abroad to establish himself with capoeira anywhere outside of Brazil, he has to work to immerse himself in that culture. And I think conversely, that it's on us to work to immerse ourselves in the capoeira culture when we're in that mindset or in that space, or, when we're dedicating that time to capoeira. Absolutely. So, I mean, how has capoeira changed? I think we just become more aware of the culture. I don't know if it's changed. And what's the emphasis on teaching? You're going to get outside of your, well, I would argue even inside of your own culture. Like, kids aren't starting capoeira, I don't think, to learn about all the folklore characters that gave such richness to it, and to really understand the nuances of the music and the tales that are being sung and the history that's being passed down. I'd argue that any 12-year-old kid anywhere in the world is getting involved in capoeira because of the flash, right? Because of the beauty of the art, visually only. And then it's only down the line that we start to introduce all these other lessons, right? Like, we start next by, the musical instruments and incorporating them, which is, for a lot of people is way more difficult, myself included, than learning physical movement. Because, I think essentially we all have rhythm, but it's more work for some than others. I'm not a play-by-ear person at all. And then beyond that, then we have to incorporate, the songs that we're singing. What do they mean? There's neutral songs that can be sung anywhere, anytime. There's songs that can be sung at a perfect time. There's songs that can be sung at the absolute wrong time.
Yep.
And making people do that. And then there's a language on top of that to understand what you're singing, not just in the context of that song, but being able to communicate with the language, right? So I understand that, zoom, 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 capoeira mata I understand, okay, my teachers told me that means that capoeira killed somebody or that capoeira can kill, whatever context you're singing it in. But historically speaking, how did that song come to be, for instance?
Right.
And because you understand the line of a song doesn't mean that you can converse with somebody in Portuguese. And it's never ending. Like, it's a lifetime of study. It really, really is. Here's my other problem with what's happened in traditional martial arts is that when I started taking judo in 1979, is you had to know all the terminology in Japanese. You didn't have to be conversational, but it wasn't the wheel throw or the
right.
whatever it was. They all had names, and you had to know them. That was important. And then for convenience, we start calling them. I'll default to a kicking there, but the roundhouse kick and the hook kick, instead of maintaining that culture and that tradition. I don't want to see that happen to capoeira. I don't want it to be, let's do the hammer kick, 10 hammer kicks and then 10 hammer 10 half moons to the front. And I hope we don't ever go that way. I don't see that happening at this point, but I think the community is still fairly connected. That the whole adage of 6 degrees of separation. Any of us can call anybody else who knows somebody. Like in North America, we're all connected. And the people that are coming along trying to take that away, I think that's being squashed. Either those people are being educated and they're learning the difference, I hope, or they're just finding that they don't have a place in capoeira. And I don't think anybody should be shunned, but I think that there's an importance, getting back to, again, culture and passing the culture on properly, right? I saw one video clip where it wasn't in North America, but it was abroad, where it was a class of 4 or 5 people. The teacher on the camera had a belt in his hand and threw it to a student. Congratulations, here's your belt. That's not capoeira. That's not what we grew up learning. Like the changing of the belt is a celebration, and it has a day, deservedly so.
Right.
And there's always been, we've had holidays where belts have been given out there because that's what has to happen because of that person's schedule or whatever the case may be. But it's still an important moment. It's
there are outlier situations that are exceptions to the norm of the traditions of capoeira on occasion, and then being flexible like that, sometimes we have to be, regardless of what we're doing.
We don't make it less.
But we absolutely no. It's it's that person's day. It's like your birthday. Yeah. Your birthday only happens once a year, and you celebrate it. And I'm not going to celebrate it 4 or 5 times a year.
No, and it's still an accomplishment.
Absolutely.
It's not. It deserves much more than having it thrown in your face and saying congratulations.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
And that's another cultural aspect that part of the capoeira culture.
I was having a really good conversation earlier this week with Professor Helio, and he brought up a really good point as well. That and a good reminder. It was the difference in having all your questions answered verbally versus a student learning to learn just through observation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think this is, as far as maybe it's not so much an influence of Canadian culture, but the reverse of it, and probably when we come back to the discussion of having challenges of running an academy, it's more of a challenge of teaching and explaining this to certain students and hopefully having the patience that they'll catch on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
But it's like it's playing by ear is a euphemism for being able to watch and just pick it up. I would argue is still playing by ear, and that's not for everybody. That's not for everybody. And quite honestly, I think it can be for everybody once you establish enough of a base and an understanding of fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
And then because Messi always, one of the things that always impressed me about him is we would go to events together. And he would be doing his thing with the other teachers at the events, but I could see him watching classes that were being taught, and the next week we'd be back in Toronto, and he'd be teaching what he saw. So you didn't have to engage in it physically to have an understanding of the movement, but again, that took years of creating a base to be able to do that. So that's not saying that somebody's a natural, and I think natural talent is overrated because easy come, easy go, right?
Oh, for sure.
If you give somebody,
you use it, you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you give somebody a brand new car tomorrow and they crash it, they're not going to feel the loss like if they worked for 5 years to save every penny to pay it off. They're going to take much better care of it. Mm-hmm. So I had when I was a teenager, my room was always a mess like every other teenager's, and then I invested in buying a can of paint and some wallpaper trim, and I did everything myself. And the room was spotless for months and months and months because I invested in that work.
Yeah.
Because I was gone for a week and my parents painted it, and who cares after that if I gouged the wall because it wasn't my work. So to me, that's no different than if you walk into any kind of, we're talking about physical activity, but you walk into any sport, for instance, and you just understand it and pick it up. If the next day you lose it, then it's just you don't feel the hit like the person who's not a natural and puts hours and hours and hours into learning it and creating that foundation. And if for some reason at that point that person loses it, I would argue that it's much more devastating.
Yeah, I think one of the phrases that I've taken away that I hear, I've heard you say many times is about investing in, when you're invested and you've invested your time and your effort and well, pretty much just those two, right? And then your physical energy, you hold on to it much more dear and you respect it much more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Let's since you've been teaching now on essentially on your own in Burlington for, you said, 13 years now, right?
Yeah, since 2000. I've been teaching on my own since 2003.
Fair
Um,
enough. Yeah, that's true too.
since-
Yeah.
and then between Toronto and then that short stay in Concord, and then almost moving directly into Burlington. But yeah,
So
Burlington, 14.
with all of that experience and with the experience of having gone out on your own and starting your own space, um, would you or do you have advice for someone who a capoeirista who's coming up and maturing through the ranks, like what would be your advice to someone who's looking to step out into, and start their own academy in their own space based on your experience?
Um, uh, Networking, you know, Mr. Mijino, when he came here in 2014, he did a talk, and he talked about investing 5 years in capoeira, because that'll create your foundation. Um, and then, I think it goes beyond just your training foundation. What are you doing in those 5 years?
Right.
So start now, and 5 years conceivably could be, white, yellow, 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 orange, 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 blue. You train hard, you could theoretically in 5 years be at orange or orange, blue. And I would say that you'd be ready to teach if you're invested at that point. So what have you done along the way? Do you have an end game? Like, that's a multi-layered question, right? Like, are you
For sure.
stepping
Pick
into,
away at the layers. Have fun.
are you, have I been in capoeira for 10 years? Now I'm ready to teach. Okay, well, there's a preparation process for that. Am I just starting capoeira like I'm in my first year and I know down the line I want to teach, right? There's preparation for that. The earlier you start preparing, the better off you're going to be. So, Messi would harp on us about being able to speak Portuguese. And I tell my students, as an example, if you get to where you should be, say, 6 months before or a year before you're supposed to get that green card, and now you want to have a crash course in speaking Portuguese in 6 months, it's not going to work, right? So, but if you take the small steps in the 14 or 15 years that it's taking you to get to that 6 month countdown, then all the ducks are going to be in a row. So if you decide that you want to teach at some point and you spend 10 years, 8 years, whatever the amount of time it is, but you spend that time putting your ducks in a row, like, what are they? Learning to be good at your music, because people are going to visit your space, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody who knows somebody. So there's a guy that I know that does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Burlington and Judo, and he sends me a message. I'm loosely connected to him through a third party that has nothing to do with capoeira. It's actually through work, and I get a message saying, there's this guy that I know who trains in Jiu-Jitsu and Judo, and he's Brazilian, and he's got a relative coming up from Brazil, to stay whatever it was a month. Can he do capoeira with you? Yeah, no problem. You can come do capoeira with me. So who's going to drop in to see you, right? All of a sudden, you've got a professor or Contra-Mestre who wants to know what capoeira is like in Burlington or Toronto or Brampton or wherever. So he Googles you, and he comes and visits your academy. I'm the big cheese in my academy. Like, it doesn't matter if you walk in the door or not. Like, this is my investment. This is my work.
Yeah.
I run an event. I've ran an annual event, which has become international every year since 2007. Since August 2007, and I was a blue and orange cord. And I defaulted to my teacher for guidance. But at some point, that's my event. That's my space. And people need to respect that. So when they walk in, and you need to surround yourself with the right people who are going to walk in the door. Somebody who's got 5 times the amount of experience you were, and have a message, who comes up to you and says, "Is it okay if I do this?" and doesn't take the reins. So that's an established investment in your time. Is that you've created an environment that's safe for people to come to, and people are respecting that you're the person that's in charge in that environment. You're not the highest rank, you're not the best, but it's your work. And people respect that. And it was an uphill battle for me. I would have, and again, I don't want to sound like I don't want this to sound biased, but a lot of it's a Brazilian art, and when you're dealing with Brazilian teachers, things have gotten way better. But there was a time when the Brazilians in the room doing their own art automatically got more credibility than I would get being a North American teacher. So I would have people that I respect come into my event and walk past me to shake the hand of the highest rank in the room first, and look at me on the way past saying, "Oh, sorry, the message gets the acknowledgement before you do." So that was part of my uphill battle about credibility. Again, it goes back to day one, to establishing to putting your ducks in a row, right? Like establishing that, and that was part of the bumps along the way. This is my space, like you don't. If you come to my house for a barbecue and you acknowledge my father but don't acknowledge me, what does that say about the respect that you have for me? Right? That you're bypassing me to speak to the most senior person in the room. So anyways, so go back. So you find it all. You find your teacher, you find your school. You start training regularly. You get good at your music. You get proficient at your singing. You travel. You make a name for yourself outside of the community. If people don't know who you are and you establish your class and want to have an event, people are not flocking to you. You have to show that you gave to capoeira before you're ready to take from it. Like all those things are important, right? Like, so I want to, like, I'm trying to think. So Professor Sakech, I think I talked to him about this a couple of years ago. That for me, he did. I can only speak to our community, right? Our immediate community, like the GTA community.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've always been a part of it. I've been a part of the Capoeira community in Toronto since day one. So I'm the only holdover from the original class of Capoeiristas and from the first Batsado that was held in Toronto. Everybody else has stopped. So I didn't really, the pressure wasn't on me to do that, to be that person where I had to go around and make a name for myself in this community because I live here. But when Professor Sokech had been coming and going from Toronto before he immigrated here from Australia, and he'd visit people when he came and he'd make his connections. But when he came to establish himself, to live and establish himself full time and to teach for a living, he made sure that he was at all the academies and knew everybody before he started saying, "Hey, can you come and support my work?" So it was an easy transition. I mean, easy. Easy's all relative. Right?
It's still, we say it's easy, but there's a ton of work behind the scenes that's got to happen.
It was a successful transition for him to go from supporting people's academies to having support of his own,
right?
Because he was so good at making sure that he networked when he came here. Makaku, he's part of the U.S. Coast Guard, and he trained with us, and he went everywhere. Like he was, if you get to the point where he was going to teach here, I believe he would have been very successful as well because he was a fixture. He was just, he had no borders. He would go to everybody's neutral ground for him, and he was well received. So that is so important if you want to aim at being a teacher at some point, because otherwise you're going to run into a roadblock, and you're not going to be well received, and you have a lot of fortitude then to break down those walls if you haven't taken those steps leading up to that point. And a lot of people just don't do it. A lot of people will just stay in their four walls or they'll quit.
Or
So,
they come and they try to, they plant their banner and I'm here now. And
yeah.
And
they don't understand it's not.
People are like, well, who are you, right?
No, yeah. And it's, there's now, culturally speaking, in capoeira, going back 100 years, if you were going to have an event or a roda, or you wanted somebody to come to your academy, you would go personally, right, and invite them. You didn't throw up some blanket invitation because who are you really? Hey everybody, I'm having capoeira in Burlington. Come one, come all. There's a formal part of the process that some teachers still believe that you have to go face to face. I'd like to think that we're a little bit more progressive because Messi Bimba and Messi Pastinha didn't have Facebook and didn't have WhatsApp, so they didn't have phone. So there was a necessity to go face to face, and I appreciate that part of the tradition. But I think if you can't do that, you need to make a personal effort for people.
Yeah,
at a certain rank and up.
I think we can. I mean, my opinion on that is, we can still today maintain that tradition by taking advantage of technology, right? You can actually maintain that tradition probably a lot easier, right, by reaching out directly to people. And if you don't have someone's contact, ask around, right? Talk to someone who might know the person you're trying to reach, and they may say, oh yeah, here's their number, or, here's their number, right? Or their email address, or this is how you can find them on Facebook. Drop them a direct message with a personal message and say, hey,
Yeah. But there's a number of different ways in 2020 of being personal, but still being personal, right? I've seen people come into the community that are like, that aren't even instructors yet, that are, hey, everybody, here's the date for my event, see you there, instead of realizing that, I have a successful event and people come to it. The work is there because I learned well from my teacher about how to do things properly and make people feel welcome. But I don't forego the formality. The people that I know will be there every year still get a personal phone call from me and a personal message saying, hey, I hope this year you can make it. And, it would mean a lot to me. And, the event won't be the same without you. And it's sincere. But you don't want to be at the point where, where ego takes over and people, and again, it's all, going back to day one. I just set my foot in the academy, and 2 years down the line now, mess. Can I have my own class? Can I host my own hall? Okay, right. Let's see how you do. Let's see how you do on a small scale. If you drop the ball, then I'm not going to allow it again, or you're going to have a lot of correcting to do. And if it's successful, then we move to the next stage, which may be a little bit bigger, a little bit more responsibility. And that's something I always wanted to be. I mean, beyond being, my goal was always the purple cord for a number of reasons. I think, just aesthetically, I think it's a beautiful color. Like I think it's a strong color. Almost every group in capoeira that has a purple cord is a high level. The purple is never a lower belt, right?
Right.
So conversely, where yellow for us is a third belt, for some groups it's a professor. For us, brown is Contra-Mestre. For some groups, it's the second or third belt. Depending on the region that you come from in Brazil, the belt systems reflect differently. Purple is purple. Purple is a high belt no matter where you go. We never, when I joined this group, not Malês, but the predecessor to Malês, still part of the same group of people, we didn't have a purple belt at that point. I never saw one until I'd been in capoeira for 12 years. So it was a bit of an elusive belt that I had actually never seen in person. So I always, beyond that, if I stuck around with capoeira long enough, I'm sure that the progression would happen just because of investment and time. But the purple belt was my goal. And I wanted to facilitate. I wanted to, if my capoeira wasn't going to be great, or if I was going to be a work in progress and, working towards my goals physically of being where I want to be, then I could work to bring people together. I could host rodas and events. I could go places and make sure that people knew that I was there to support them, and then do my part to bring people together. That's what I wanted to do. That was a goal I had from very early on. And again, I had to set my ducks in a row from day one to get to that point where my teacher would trust me to do it, and then to do it successfully.
Cool. Let's why don't you tell us? I know you've probably got many great memories and possibly proud moments, and this might be a tough question for someone who's been training and teaching for so long. But tell us about one of your most memorable or proudest moments at your academy.
At my academy, when the event, having the first event was, it was really a roda and a one-day workshop. It was in August of 2007 I wanted to do a formal opening. So we started the classes in March. The grand opening, for lack of a better term, was in April. We were kind of public. And then by the summer, I wanted to do, bring a couple of people to teach and have a roda. So that was important to me. The first year that we had an international event, which was 2016, was a big event. Making the transition from, the locals, just operating within, the comfort zone with very, very talented capoeiristas, don't get me wrong, but kind of taking a leap of faith at that point to go, okay, let's go bigger. Let's go outside of North America and start bringing some talent to Europe and to South America. I don't know, like having, um, when I get to the point, which is going to come within the next couple of years, of having a student that started with me and only me getting their instructor cord, will be something. I have students that are high belts, but they also have influence from different teachers, which is fine. But it's something else when you know that the person has done their first Jenga with you, their first stretch, their first class with you, and they've stuck with you long enough to get a green cord, is a big deal. Um, Moments that when it happens, not at every event, but we've had a number. We No, at every event. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. At every event, there's a moment where, like, have you ever had? Here, let me ask you this question,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can reflect this back
All
for
right.
me. Have you ever had, and this is kind of existential and a little bit science fiction, but have you ever experienced a perfect moment in time?
A perfect moment in time? Um, that's a very good question. That's a tough one,
So
right? Not.
the first time I went to Brazil, I stayed there for 3 months, and I was sitting on the roof of a house that I was staying at, and it was in the evening, and I was by myself, and it wasn't cold, it wasn't hot, there wasn't a breeze, and the sky was clear. And for me, that moment was a perfect moment in time. It's hard to explain. So, having said that,
Like everything was
there
in
have been
balance, everything was in check.
everything was perfect.
Yeah.
I was out of my element. I was thousands of miles away from where I belonged, but that moment was perfect. So, in capoeira, there's been perfect moments for me. Like in normally when it comes to music, and not me, not my music, but bringing the energy together, like being the facilitator, hopefully having an understanding of the balance that you need to bring a successful event together, making
Right.
sure that there's no animosity between two people that you didn't anticipate. Right, you don't want to bring two bad energies together.
Mm.
Just knowing who's going to play off of each other well, and I I hate to get off track, but I guess my thought processes are
No, go
are
ahead. No, this is
they're,
this is an opportunity for
they're,
you to tell
I know
yourself like
they're very,
of ultimately in the end, when I get this all published, the it's an opportunity for potentially new capoeiristas to kind of see, across the country, you know, um, I'm going to take this off to the side as well because like we talk about this, at least I um, in my belief is, if you're looking to study a martial art, don't just, say, whatever, it's capoeira, I want to learn capoeira. Well, and you were talking about this before, right? Like, you know, when we're talking about the people who live in urban versus suburban, um, don't pick the first thing that's just close to you. Go and check it out. But if you don't feel comfortable, or if you don't feel like there's a mesh there, then keep looking, right? So, anyways, like, go ahead, keep talking.
no, for sure. Even touching on that is, I would rather somebody not do capoeira with me if they can learn capoeira better from somebody else, because the connection is better. Then go, because you're going to give more to capoeira that way
Hmm.
than by, we've seen this over the years, than by closing your doors and telling people they're not permitted to go anywhere else. That's fear. That's fear and ego. Anyways, um, I think emotion is a huge part of capoeira, and I've said this for years. Not right away, but at some point you need to have an emotional connection to capoeira. And I find more often than not that comes out through music. Um, I'd say that by the time you probably get to be yellow, give yourself 2 3 years. You have to have a moment. You have to be at a hada where you get goosebumps, or where you well up, because the energy is immense. So those are perfect moments for me. There was one. There was two actually that were at the same event. It wasn't at my academy, but it was an extension of the event that I was doing, because when I started teaching, I was very stubborn about, my event has to happen in Burlington. It's Burlington Capoeira. It's my work. I'm not advertising for anybody else. If we're going to do anything, if we're going to do an aside at the event, a HODA or whatever outside of the academy, it has to be in Burlington. And I've changed my mind since then, because I understand my own intentions was because I was trying to develop the work. But again, also I'm limiting involvement in capoeira because there's people that might not be able to get to Burlington. Why shouldn't they be able to partake in that energy,
Hmm.
in part or in whole? So we had an agreement, with this. And again, if I've got 10 students and there's 100 people participating in my event, I only represent 10% of that event. So can I expect the other 90% to accommodate to me? No, I can lift up my 10% on one night or 2 nights of that event and go downtown and bring it to the urban environment where people want it at their fingertips, because maybe I might encourage somebody to do more with it. So, right, Thursday and Friday were so good in Toronto, I have to go to Burlington on Saturday to see what it's all about. I have to have part of that energy.
Right.
So this one event in 2016 where we had where we brought Monsieur Lebon here, and Monsieur Lebon and Monsieur Marcelo were on the berimbau, and Contra-Mestre Camarao was a very talented musician. I mean, you know that, but let me speak to the people that are going to see this at some point or hear.
For sure.
He's for me, he's the voice of our generation of capoeira. He's a beautiful singer, and he's very, very skilled. Anyways, so he's playing. Somebody asks to take the berimbau from him, and he, there's no reason to other than, hey, maybe I feel like playing capoeira, or maybe I need to be in a picture beside Mr. Lebon. I don't know what this person's motive was, but who I think I can comfortably speak about it. I've trained with him for almost a quarter of a century. He just looks at him and smiles and shakes his head and says, "Are you kidding? Like, I'm not giving up this moment with these." And at the same event, at the end of the Roda, there was no singing. There was atabaki and padeiro and berimbau, and people were just Messi Lua, Messi Lebon took 2 of the berimbaus. It might have been Messi Marcelo was the 3rd. I don't remember that much, but I just remember being in awe of the music. It was just music. There was no singing, but just seeing what they were doing with the berimbau was. And I think Messi was inspired to that level, being beside Messi Lebon, who again I would argue is at the top of the food chain as far as, well, I mean, capoeira overall, but the music is. I can't think of a greater reference in capoeira music for me personally than Messi Lebon. So to be pushed to that, it was just phenomenal to watch. You couldn't take away from it. Like, it wasn't, it was their moment. It was their perfect moment in time to own. And maybe they don't recognize that, but through them, that was one of those moments for me. I think more than proud moments, I've had more enlightening moments, and more of them have happened outside of where I teach than inside, but just like a comment that's been made, or just a moment in time that kind of affirms that, okay, my path is straight.
So maybe it's a better question for me to ask is, like, what moments have been more impactful on you versus, right? Which is basically what you're alluding to, or what you're talking about, or moments that have been impactful and like you said, enlightening.
I think the problem with me trying to find those impactful moments at my own event is I don't really participate in my own events. I'm running around trying to organize it and make sure that everything is running. Maybe other people have those moments at events, but I'm usually behind the scenes trying to do too much.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of Messi Lewis said this to me once. He goes, sometimes the best event is somebody else's event.
Yeah.
So because you're not running around, right?
Yeah. You don't, like, I very rarely get a game in at my own event. Maybe 5 for the whole weekend.
Yeah.
And then as the days go on, it just becomes more hectic. I mean, the Thursday night is, downtown, but it's only a Roda. Okay, I just have to really show up on time because Messi's fanatical about his instruments being played, so I usually don't even have to bring mine. Friday night is a shorter night, and it's a smaller dinner. And then Saturday's the big production where, we're kind of busting at the seams, and, there's a dinner for 100, 120 people that has to be coordinated. And plus, replacing the instruments and blah, 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 everything that goes into doing it. For sure. So, but other events, I mean, we went to an event myself. There was probably 15 or 20 of us that went to Detroit to an event in 2004. And Contra-Mestre Camarao and I went we weren't teachers yet, but we were welcomed as teachers because we were running our own classes in Toronto. And the teacher that was running the event there, the Messi, pulled us to one side after realizing that we're training. I mean, we're represented very strongly by Messi Lua, but we're training and learning by ourselves. And him saying that just, you guys are playing capoeira. and it was very subtle, and it wasn't, nobody needed a pat on the back. It wasn't, you guys were amazing, wasn't, much, but you're on the right path. You were doing the right things.
Nice.
And you're playing the game.
Nice.
That to me was huge. In 2010, when I was in Brazil at a Batizado, getting my green cord once everything was done and the HUD that was happening, and it was more relaxed. Everything had passed and all the belts had been given out, and I had the microphone and I was singing. And Messi Museo was at that event as a guest, and I was singing Sin Capoeira Não Posso Viver, which is a song by Messi Charmi. And when I looked over my shoulder, Messi Museo was singing the chorus of the song that I was leading. Maybe for a lot of people that really wouldn't mean anything, but to me it was huge. Like, here's this Messi that's contributing to the chorus of the song that I'm leading. It wasn't, I don't know.
Kind of giving you that support role versus, in a sense, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't amazing for anybody else, and nobody needs to understand it. It was just,
that's your moment.
I'm on the right path. Right? The path, I'm going the right direction. So it's been little moments like that, really, that have just, they happen every once in a while. I grew up being taught in a way that if you're not corrected, just assume that you're doing it right, or you have the right idea. Anyways, you're going the right direction. So we didn't get a lot of pat on the backs, which is fine. Yep. So that I know when they come that they're deserved. When that moment comes, that the congratulations come, that it's well earned.
Yeah, there's more weight behind that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, listen, I want to thank you for your time. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
We had a little struggles in the beginning with the technology stuff, but we've ironed it out, and we were able to have this awesome conversation. And not only thank you for your time now, but I owe you a thank you since 2003, right? Because if it wasn't for that night that I came across Engraçado having a holiday here in Brampton, I would not have made the connection to you and to our family here, a Capoeira family here in Toronto or in the GTA, right? Quite honestly, I feel enriched. Your efforts, your work kept all of us together for sure. There's no doubt about it. And I would gladly stand in front of anybody who would say otherwise.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. I know it's kind of sunny out, and good luck with the new family member as well.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Ciao, ciao. Valeu.